All right, I'm going to call this step 10B or whatever. I want to have a brief discussion with everybody about what's going on with the fuel tanks. So if you will remember, we put this together in the last episode, and as a guide, Hobby Boss has included a side view, and it says 4 scale, and you can look and see everything is in there the way that it should be according to the instructions and the way that things are laid out. And if you notice on the piece itself, here are the bands that are molded into the 2 halves of the tank. Right here, that's supposed to match up with the moldings on here. So I'm going to take, just real quick, this comes in a later step, but I just started dry fitting some of this to make sure everything was square and set up the way I wanted. And what I found out is that it sits with the fuel tank in front like we want, and the steps are where they are wanted to be, and they are level, but the fuel tank cap should actually not exist there, but in actuality should be more up here and at a shallower angle. And so I went and took a look, and most people who have done the builds of this kit have not addressed this problem whatsoever. The few that have addressed it are because they got the Voyager photo etch set, and in that, the Voyager set has you completely remove those bands and put on photo etch bands and new photo etch steps. And that's the problem with the left side, the larger tank. On the right side, when I put this together with you, this again was put together correctly. The problem is that with that in correctly, when it was placed here, the steps were way off, like way off. So what do you do when you've incorrectly put parts onto a kit? Well, I went in and very carefully scored underneath where the glue had set for this, and then pried them off and got these marks right there. So the first thing we need to do is address those glue marks, and I am using my sponge again, sanding sponge. I'm using the 120 grit sanding. Now, for this particular build, I don't want to fix everything. This one isn't about accuracy. This is about going over the kit as I'm building it, finding little problems. This changing of the steps on this side is, in my mind, necessary because it's just too obvious. But the need to change the fuel caps is not something that I really think is within the scope of what I'm doing. However, it's not really buffing out. When I glued that in, I glued it in very well. So what I need to do is add a little bit of putty there just to fix that problem real quick like. I'm using Tester's green putty. We all know that, Squadron green putty. We all know that Squadron went out of business, came back into business. Who knows what's going on. I put a little bit of Tester's cement on the area where I want the parts to go, or the putty to go. Now, the nice thing is Squadron green putty does mix with Tester's cement to get it to loosen up or thin out, however you want to think of it. I'm pretty sure it's the toluene. So you could just have a container of toluene around and use that as well. A little hot, but so all I'm doing is putting it in those glue marks. Now I'm going to let this dry overnight. And since I'm here, I'm just going to put some of this putty right in to those marks right there. But I'm going to leave this overnight. I'll come back and I'll sand it. And then I will put it on the side for the on the strap so I can get a good view of where they are and how much this needs to change to get this done moderately correctly. Sounds like I'm waffling, but I'm not, I promise. But it looks like the difference is going to be that this step here is going to be more around where the top of the other step originally was. So, and while we're at it, this is a good time to look over the parts that were taken off. In this case, right here, there does seem to be some lift. All I'm doing is going through and checking to make sure everything is straight and level and good. And that's just a little bit of glue and a little bit of clamping with the forceps to make sure it works. And you can see this all came up. So when I was doing this, I was not expecting to have to take this off the way that I did. So there may be some issues with this that aren't normally ascribed to building the kit. But if nothing else, you got to see it here first. Watch out for the steps, the fuel tanks, specifically on the right hand side. We are. Again, let this dry overnight and then we'll come back and see what to do about it in the morning.